The modern Indian Republic operates through a massive, complex administrative machinery. But to understand how that machinery functions, you must examine the moment its earliest structural blueprints were dropped into place by a colonial power. If you are preparing for the UPPCS examination, the standard of historical and legal knowledge required is rigorous. Standard compendiums like the Ghatnachakra 2025 Polity edition exist specifically to handle this density of information. This syllabus index breaks down the immense subject of Indian polity into 42 distinct components. Right at the top is Chapter 1, Constitutional Development of India. Notice how this foundational chapter is systematically divided into two distinct historical eras. This timeline's first track charts the East India Company rule. It encompasses the initial regulatory framework, spanning from 1773 to 1853. The second track isolates Crown Rule, covering 1858 to 1947, mapping the era of direct imperial administration. This divide marks a shift in the source of authority. For the first 80 years, the legal framework focused on controlling the commercial interests of a corporation, before the transition to direct state sovereignty. Prior to 1773, the East India Company operated with vast autonomy. They functioned as an independent group of merchants, wielding unchecked executive and military power across growing territories in India. The British Parliament recognized that allowing a private trading company to govern massive foreign populations without sovereign oversight was a severe liability. They needed a mechanism to exert control. That control mechanism arrived as the Regulating Act of 1773. This was the initial structural block forced down onto the company by Parliament. The act immediately centralized administration. It elevated the Governor of Bengal to Governor General, subordinating the independent presidencies of Bombay and Madras to Bengal's authority. But its most critical byproduct was the mandate to create an independent judicial authority. It legally separated judicial oversight from the company's executive merchants. The act transformed a purely commercial enterprise into a geographically bound political entity with formal, hierarchical legal structures. When competitive administrative exams test this historical period, they focus entirely on the precise legal structures created by these interventions. This diagram recreates a standard foundational examination query. Under which act was the provision made for the establishment of the Supreme Court in Calcutta? The legally correct answer is option A, the Regulating Act of 1773. Examiners use this specific question to test a granular distinction. Aspirants frequently confuse the year the legislation was passed with the year the court physically opened its doors. While the legal provision was written into the 1773 Act, the institution itself only became fully operational in 1774. The exact geographic locus for this new judicial power was the city of Calcutta. By placing the Supreme Court there, Calcutta served as ground zero for British judicial infrastructure, creating an institutional memory that persists in Indian law today. A legislative mandate written in London is useless without an administrator to execute it. Parliament appointed a specific individual to cross the ocean and lead this new legal framework. This is Sir Elijah Impey, first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. His court included 3 other judges, all wearing formal British legal robes. The immediate jurisdiction of this 1774 court was highly restricted. It primarily held authority over British subjects and company employees, rather than the wider Indian populace. Because the court operated independently of the company, it immediately generated friction. Impey's judiciary frequently clashed with the company's established executive council over who held ultimate authority. Impey's appointment marks the exact genesis point. The moment of a formalized, hierarchical judicial system was grafted onto the subcontinent. When we step back from the specific details of 1774 Calcutta, we can see how this single court fits into an overarching constitutional trajectory. Returning to our timeline, the 1773 Regulating Act was not a one-off event. It was the catalyst for a continuous tightening of parliamentary control. We see this clearly in the subsequent milestones, specifically the Charter Acts of 1813 and 1833. These acts stripped the East India Company of its commercial monopolies, simultaneously expanding administrative duties. This process reached an absolute boundary in 1858. Here, company rule was abolished entirely, replaced by the direct sovereignty of the British Crown. Every subsequent constitutional reform, right up until 1947, was iteratively built upon the structural logic first established in 1773. For a civil services aspirant, understanding this historical arc is a practical necessity for the exam. Aspirants must maintain these distinctions. 1773 is the legal provision, 1774 the physical establishment, and Impey the architect. This granular historical rigor provides the framework for understanding the modern republic's complex legal systems. Mapping this timeline requires structured revision. Effective study relies on a chapter-by-chapter methodology. You must build your knowledge sequentially, exactly as these acts were built. Mastering Indian constitutional development requires tracing the structural evolution of power as it transitioned from a corporate charter to a sovereign constitution.